founder and managing partner of Team Rapid. We've worked with him closely on several projects in the past. Zach is an incredible both operations professional and no coder. So we wanted him to share his journey around how we kind of fell into this field. So Zach, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Fireside Chat.
Yeah, this is awesome. Glad to be here. Thanks.
So Zach, maybe you want to start off with just a little bit background on yourself, kind of even like before you fell into like the no coder operational world, and then questions for you.
Yeah, I'm going to start back at my education because I think that actually plays into what no code ops means. And so going all the way back to college, was business graduate, focusing in finance and accounting. The first job that I got out, I've always been in consulting my entire career, but the first job that I got out of school was for a consulting company doing SAP data migration for Fortune 500 companies. And we had a proprietary tool there. And this is really where I got my feet wet with what low code was. But however, I didn't even know it at the time. And this was probably 15 years ago. We would use a proprietary low code tool to help do all of the ETL, all of the data migration work, do data governance, data capture, working with all of these different business groups, building these data web applications incredibly fast with no code at all, and being able to work with businesses to correct their data, to capture new data, to build all of these different features and functionality around work streams. And really that was the beginning of where I was introduced to low code without even really knowing it at the time. I left that organization and then I jumped in on my own and started building out a SaaS solution in the traditional methods, from all the way from the full stack of database to traditional programming. And the clientele that we were working with is all event-based companies, and they had different customizations that they wanted on the platform. It was all around managing their staff and their HR teams and whatnot. And they kept asking all these different requests, and it would take quite a bit of time to customize it for different individuals. And I started to dive deeper into what no code and low code tools were available to help supplement me being a single person doing full stack development, how we could improve that and speed it up. So that was kind of the first realization where I knew how powerful low code and no code can be, as far as building solutions and working in this kind of no code operator model. That company was acqui-hired. Essentially, they took over all of our customers from a competitor, and I jumped into an actual low code platform company. So I was as a senior solution architect working across multiple accounts, Fortune 500, SMB, building different solutions, all using a no code, low code platform. Again, really seeing the power of how quickly you can go into an organization, meet with the business, not even having to worry about the engineering and the IT teams at that time, and working through a business problem, working through a workflow, and putting something tangible back into the business's hands within a week, 2 weeks, and being able to iterate upon that. Taking that kind of knowledge and seeing that experience in the industry, that's where the idea of Rapid and jumping out of the kind of sole single platform and going into agnostic mode is, hey, there's so many tools out there. I'm sure as a lot of us can attest to, there's a new one that you discover every day.
Every other day.
Every day. Yeah. My list of tools and different solutions is growing quite large. But that's where the idea of Rapid really came into play is, hey, how can we use low code, no code, build this whole development agency, helping internal operational teams improve, reimagine, and even create these new processes and workflows. And that's what I've been working on for quite some time across different clientele and building a lot of different solutions.
That's awesome. So what's interesting to me is that you have done this like no code operator career, like internally and externally, like, and a kind of hybrid, like a solutions architect who works for a platform is kind of doing it for both parties, right? So you've been like an external consultant, you've worked internally with teams, And you've been, when you were doing the SaaS stuff, you were just straight up the no-code operator internally. I'm curious, at what point in your journey did the terms like no-code or low-code even come into the picture?
Yeah, I would say it's probably over the last 5 or 6 years once I started jumping actually into the enterprise platform company. Like I said before that, it wasn't even really known to me. I was just doing it and being able to, wow, this is crazy. You can build and develop things incredibly fast. It didn't really have that terminology around it. So I think it more or less just the marketing tech got attached to it with the firms that I was working with. But I think in a sense, we probably have all done it in some form or fashion, right? I think low code, no code has evolved in different forms over the years. I think even to the extent of people building out workflows and dashboards in Excel could count as low code or no code to a full extent. So it's interesting, right? You've probably done it to a certain degree, but now that it's have the marketing and the coin around it, and a lot of solutions now that have focused solely on this, and we can see that the verticals that have developed for low code, no code solutions really empower the individual operator in those work streams.
Awesome. Shaf, questions from your end? I think, Shaf, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was just about to drop a poll. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Do it. Go ahead and drop the poll, because I have some more. So, Zach, talk to me about so going into like this role, right? You've done this in a bunch of different ways through a bunch of different companies. I've personally worked with you and seen how phenomenal you are at this. What would you say before learning any vendor or anything specifically? What would you say is like the most needed skill of a no-code operator before they even like jump into this new kind of role for companies?
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to is understanding the business process or the problem that you're looking to tackle, to be honest. The technology is kind of secondhand to it. And I think you kind of hit on it, as there's different hats where I've worn as a solution architect, I've worn it as a developer, et cetera. But I think what no-code and low-code tools empower a no-code operator to be is this person who can straddle both the business expert, the person closest to the business process, and understanding then how I can almost single-handedly go ahead and build the solution that I'm trying to work through. So you kind of straddle this line between business process, business focused mindset to also the technical mindset, and you live on both sides of those worlds. So I think one of the biggest skills that someone can have is really just understanding that workflow, is being able to jot it down on paper, go through, this is the beginning, these are the inputs, these are the outputs. And then you can take that, and with your knowledge of no code, the different pieces that you can build around an architecture or stack of low code, no code tools, you can start to plug those in and layer them on top of it. And the tool just becomes essentially that, right? It's a tool. It's in your toolkit. You're using a hammer, you're using a drill, depending on what need you have. You understanding the business and the business process will then kind of refine what tool is best suited for you and how you can amplify that from a no-code perspective.
It's super interesting, right? Because a lot of the journey of like someone who's doing this stuff internally at companies does mirror for me externally how this happens too, in terms of just like a founder building a SaaS tool, right? Falling in love with the problem over the solution becomes so important in the early stages. And I think the same is to be said for when you're finding new opportunities internally to either automate or build workflows around. I know that I've been guilty of this and done this the wrong way so many times, where I would find a tool, get excited about it, and then try to in post find a prompt to graft to it. But the much better way to do things, and the recommended way, is really falling in love with the problem, figuring it out step by step, mapping out current and ideal future state process maps, and then seeing what solutions kind of best apply to that. So another question, follow up to that, Zach, is I've noticed on my journey, right? Like for instance, like when I was at Compass, whenever I would find a workflow, a lot of times at companies, workflows are so interdependent on other organizations within the company, right? So there's nothing that just like lives on an island. Everything's interconnected. And I've personally found trouble as an operator figuring out where to draw the line between what's in and out of scope, right? Because all of a sudden, folks start realizing that, oh, wow, Zach can build these processes without going to our developers. He can move really fast. So let's just dump this whole thing on his plate. And like all of a sudden, you're boiling that whole ocean, right? How do you practice limiting scope and setting yourself up for success when like intaking these workflows from people?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think the first step is really looking at what the end result is to be accomplished. So what's the job at hand? And the way that the process is designed currently may not be the most efficient way, especially when you start layering in no-code or low-code tools. For example, as a use case that I've worked with a customer on, they have a centralized ERP system that pretty much the entire company runs off of. Deals, customers are coming into it, and that's kind of their origination of the process. But there's supplemental data that has to be captured. There's different workflows that then stream off of that don't live within this system. And so, there's somewhat of a technical aspect where you've set up an integration or a webhook using Zapier and being able to bring that in Airtable and create this process now somewhat guardrailed by using a low-code, no-code tool to then capture the additional data points and facilitate the process within a system outside of the core ERP system. So it's tricky to really put limits on it. I think there's a couple like guiding principles. One is get closest to the business process as possible. Like where should that live? The source of truth, essentially. Like I'll be honest, I wouldn't advise the way that this process is designed that I just mentioned with Zapier and Airtable adding additional information, because now you have two sets of the source of truth, essentially. So when you're looking at it, I think one of the principles is really just saying how close can you get to the business process, the actual transaction happening, and make sure that you draw some of the lines there and not blur them and create these, the shadow IT or the Wild West, like you said, where someone can say, oh, now we can just go use all these tools and create whatever we want. But it doesn't necessarily then integrate back in either, right? So now there's a disconnect between these two data sets and whatnot. And so there's some manual intervention that has to happen there. And this process was created before I got there, as a disclaimer. So, but
Zach's like, oh, I did it. But
yeah, exactly. But I think you get the idea, right? Though, is that there's certainly silos and functions where you can pull that out, right? Like if this wasn't necessary to integrate back in, and it was truly an independent workflow that was going to just end right there at that point in time, then I think that completely makes sense. And so I think the overarching guiding principle that I go with anyone is saying, how close can we get to this transaction? Can we just keep it within one system, the core system, or if we have a way of communicating back and making sure that the data's whole at any point in time, I think is one of the biggest pieces. The second two, I think, depending on the size of the organization, you have to kind of look at what are all those dependencies, what are the different groups and the different teams coming in and playing a different role in there. Again, maybe as it's designed currently isn't the most efficient way. Maybe it's not the best way. Maybe we can evolve everyone onto this no-code platform. So you can kind of take incremental steps there. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing, saying that, hey, because we're not integrated back or whatnot, let's put a limit here and not put it. But maybe you do it in a phased approach where you can say stage one is, hey, let's take this process outside of the scope, build it, and then we can start to fold in the larger process and scope.
Awesome. Shaf, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So based on that, one of the main questions that I have is like for a beginner, right? In order for them to kind of like work out all these workflows and all these databases, what is that one tool that someone can start off and then just be like, okay, this is the one system that I am okay with, that I can definitely start as a beginner. So what is that one tool you think you could recommend to beginners?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's challenging. I think one of the closest and most relatable tools that exists out there in the no-code space is Airtable, to be honest. I think it has a lot of the different functionalities, because I kind of break no-code down into two main buckets. One is creating these custom applications, these custom solutions, maybe like a UI, dashboard, etc. And then the other bucket is around these automated integrations and system integrations, like the Zapiers, the Integramats of the world. And I think Airtable has done a good job of simplifying both of those worlds, especially now with the interactive designer on the custom app side of it.
Oh, yeah. That is a big announcement.
Yeah. It's really cool, especially from an internal ops perspective, too, is you can now build these pretty robust applications, have guardrails that could still fall well within kind of your IT organization's realm. You get a flavor of this customization, building out data models, data sets, capturing data, being able to iterate quickly on that side. And now you also have the automation functionality within Airtable, which is great. So I think you get a flavor of both of these buckets where I classify low code and no code, and you get some pretty good experience. And there's a pretty low barrier learning curve on Airtable. So it's very familiar, right? It's very Excel based, right? So I think you get that.
What's so funny is I stayed away from Airtable automations for the longest time just because my comfort zone was always Zapier. And I guess finally we have actually paid for Airtable as of not too long ago. I was like, you know what? I remember when people would apply to the no code ops community, in Airtable, it just lets email notify the creator of the form. But I also wanted Shaft to get a notification when someone would apply to the community. And so I was like, you know what? Zapier, let me mess with Airtable automation. I'm I was pretty impressed with how good it was for a native integration platform. It was super easy to use.
Yeah, in one case, I've actually built, I'll call it, it's pretty complex process that could be replicated across many different use cases. But for this particular scenario, built out a solution where a customer team can either email into a inbox that's being monitored systematically an order. We bring it into Airtable. We kind of parse out all the different pieces and the different data points within Airtable. And then we use some of the automation to actually do a business logic around which vendor we should select to facilitate this order. And so there's, region, do we look at the state? Does this vendor supply for the state? What priority do we want the vendors to be ranked in? Do we want to send all of our orders to vendor A versus vendor Z? And then do they have capacity? We can even keep how many orders we've sent to a particular vendor. And so there's an automation within Airtable. Once a record enters the Airtable base, a new order, it will go through all of these rules. It will attach the appropriate vendor based on that business logic. And then it will either send an email order to the vendor to fulfill it, or if they have an API or an integration, we actually then send it through an API. And that's all done within Airtable with their automations. Some with Zapier on top of it for automating and monitoring the email inbox and being able to parse it out. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty, when you look at it.
Using Zapier's native parser, how brazen.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we right to your point of earlier is we didn't have all the IT resources available to us at this organization to create a direct API input from where the customer and the sales team is actually ordering. So we have an email. They just drop an email in and it has a standardized template and we parse it out. It works for the time.
I love email as API. It's a favored work. I love it. So actually a follow-up to Shaft's question, right? So the ways I see it, there's kind of two paths for a no-code operator in today's world, right? There's the folks working internally. So, they're either in marketing ops or they're in some kind of operational role or they're in marketing or customer success and they kind of want to level up their career. And then there's the folks who want to go freelance and just, become a no-code operations professional that consults for other companies. You've done both in your career. Curious what you would recommend to folks as steps to transition to both of those paths or either one.
Yeah, I think they both take very similar mindsets. It's kind of that, if you're working within an organization, it's that entrepreneur type of mindset where, hey, I'm not going to just put an IT request out there and see when it comes to fruition. Let's sit on it for 6 months and see, right? It's hey, let's actually take the charge. Let's go set up one of these tools. and start facilitating the process and the workflow. And again, I think with low-code and no-code tools, you can get stood up really quickly. You learn the process, not even just from a tactical perspective of, hey, let's put this field over here, or this UI over here, make it look prettier. But the end result you actually learn from. Maybe you get better insight, better metrics. Why are customers not ordering? They've dropped off. We can then change the entire process extremely fast, right? So you learn. So I think from the entrepreneur type of model, when you're working within organizations, kind of just taking the reins and starting to facilitate some of that, highlight it to your teams and your organization, and being able to iterate on it. And then I think as the freelancer model, it's a very similar mindset in the sense there where you're still enabling these organizations and these teams to kind of take the reins and start running with these solutions. You're just helping and facilitate and support it. And I mean, I think one of the biggest things I see at this point in time, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this, and we've definitely seen it from the market more recently with the pandemic and everything, is IT and engineering teams are strapped, right? They're just cut so thin, they can't focus across, especially the internal ops side of it. And so these teams need to be empowered, and someone like me as a freelancer can come in and start to provide, I think Phil, you might have wrote this up nicely the other day, is about the Lego blocks, right? It's like, hey, I know all these Lego pieces here. You have a problem. Let's put these into practice and into your solution, and being able to do it. So I think they both have very similar mindsets. I think one is just helping and empower as a freelancer these teams and these folks to really grab a hold of the low-code, no-code tools. And then on the flip side, I think it's you as being the code operator within an organization. You are the closest to the business, is just start picking up these tools and running with a workflow and a process and learning from that and iterating and showing the organization what you can do with it.
Yeah, such a good answer, man. And I also say that when I was bringing up those solutions internally, right? I was always scared that oh man, this is the devs or the IT team, they're never going to buy into this stuff. They must already know about these tools and have passed on them. There was just almost like an imposter syndrome of this is if I was able to find these things, clearly other people have found it and passed on them, or they've already thought about this. And what I find was most of the time people just not even thought about it as a solution. And they'd be wow, this is a really interesting way to solve this problem, and wouldn't increase our technical debt. Yeah, please, seriously look into this. And I was always kind of blown away with that response. Yeah, I was kind of shocked. So anyone at an organization looking to build out these tools, don't be shy about doing your own research and bringing it up to folks. Zach, did you have something you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a great call out. It's really just, you being the advocate for this movement, I'll call it, and with low-code and no-code tools, and bring it. And whether you actually use that tool that you brought from a vendor perspectively, or maybe the engineering team starts to think about low-code as a kind of a means to have how they operate. So one of the clients that I work with kind of brought me on to help develop their digital transformation strategy. And now they're really embracing low code. So the engineering team has come up with an actual framework and architecture around how can we build out these low code tools that the engineering team will build and facilitate. So it all stays within the realm of engineering and IT. It's all controlled. It falls under their compliance needs and their security and data, cleanliness. But they're going to hand those tools and empower then to the business line to actually go develop all of these different solutions. So they're really embracing low code, not necessarily purchasing as third-party SaaS solutions, but they're really building it internally and empowering their business. And I think that's really cool. To your point, is just, hey, bring light to it and show them.
Yeah, totally. I'm laughing at the comment from the chat that someone pointed out. I have the Shark Tank chair. Had to get it. But I will note the original Ian's chair is $6,000, and I was not doing that. So I got an imitation one on Wayfair. But it's pretty legit. It looks pretty good.
Is it comfy?
It's really
that's the question of the hour. Is it comfy?
It is so comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
You're safe.
Some good deals.
Yeah. maybe after a Series A one day, we'll get the real stuff. But in the meantime, we're sticking with the Wayfair models. Amazing. So speaking of which, I'd love to open up the floor to any questions. So Shaf, what's the best way for people to participate with questions?
Yeah, so I just left in the group chat, and also you can leave it in the comment section on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you click on comments, you can definitely just comment or ask any questions there. And if you are comfortable with it, we can definitely put you up on the mic so you can be able to, join us on stage and ask your questions live with us. So if anyone is up for that, please feel free to ask anything that you want from us. So
cool.
Go ahead.
And in the meantime, while we're waiting for questions, Shaf, any more from you?
No, I just honestly really like this conversation overall because I am myself a new no-code operator to begin with. So me and Zach, we go way back. So I've had some questions about retool from him and stuff like that. And everything is just very, very, as a beginner, it kind of just blows your mind on what is, readily available out there for you to create all these internal tools to kind of save money, save time, and all of that. And then recently I was, I was introduced to Stacker, and compared to Retool, Stacker is definitely much easier and beginner friendly. So anyone out there who wants to start, I would definitely recommend Airtable and Stacker. And if you're really up for it and if you really want to go above and beyond, you can go on with Retool and Looker and all those other cool no-code platforms that you can definitely use for your organization. So yeah, that is my final thoughts on this. Definitely, if you're a beginner, start with Airtable. And because Airtable just came out with their interfaces and their UIs, it's definitely a game changer for a lot of people. So yeah, Airtable and Stacker are my go-tos right now.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm very excited, Shaf, for us to play with the UI designer within Airtable. I'm excited.
It is interesting too. And I think, Shaf, as you kind of point out, the different, I'll call them tiers or hierarchies of the different tool sets out there from a low code and no code perspective. I mean, even within the Zapier world, right? There's use cases where we just use it as a notification means, hey, when this status changes in Airtable or something, send off an email or do whatever. But you can get pretty creative and complex with PDF parsing and reading a PDF and putting the fields back in and validating, and there's one use case where it's saving tons of time for these teams where they're getting hundreds of contracts that they have to read through, their standardized contracts. We just threw it into a doc parser. It pulls out the different data points, throws it back into Airtable, and they can validate the input versus what's in the contract seamlessly. And it's amazing. Yeah. The different levels of complexity that you can get, across the different tools to enterprise grade, ERP level systems, architectures, HIPAA compliant applications. There's so many low code and no code tools out there. It's amazing. So everyone do all the research and keep out there and reach out to us, and we'll all pitch in. And
if you have questions on this front, Zach is a master of this stuff for sure. So yeah, he is a great dude to reach out to. Zach, we have a question for you.
I'm going to invite Cody up on stage. So if you are
great,
that Cody, we would love to have you up on stage and ask the question personally.
Oh, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Cody, hey, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well.
Just a question. How do you know which platform to start with for, a particular situation? Is there a matrix out there for all the different types of platforms?
Yeah, it's a really good question. To answer the second part of that, Cody and I go back quite a bit, by the way. So I appreciate him being here and asking these questions. I don't know of a great resource. I mean, I think from comparing the tools, I don't know if there's one centralized location, to be honest, but I think, communities like the No Code Ops, what Phil and Shaf have done here, is a great opportunity to learn about different tools. I think Twitter, to be honest, when you follow a few of the folks who are involved in no code space, you get a really good insight into the different tools out there. Before I answer the second part, I don't know, Phil or for Chef, have you guys seen like a pretty comprehensive location for tool comparisons?
Yeah, I think like it definitely lives within either different online lists or communities. One thing I often do is I'll search like G2 and Capterra for certain needs, and they're really good at breaking things down. One tool within G2 that I love that not a lot of people are super familiar with, and if you're at an organization choosing between tools, it will make you look like a total rock star. Is in G2 you can choose like up to I think 4 different tools and like compare them side by side and save the URL for that. So you can like look like a rock star just by sending that URL to folks in your org, being like, here's the comparison between these 4. So those 2 I love. I also know in terms of tools, Capiche is like a really cool community just focused on tools, especially for like internal usage organizations. A lot of really good feedback in there. And then honestly, if you just search like no code list or like no code tools on Google, there's a website that just like list out a bunch of different no code tools. And hopefully one day with no code ops, like we'll make something more public where we just like have an easy to sort through list on tools in this matter. We just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, it's a good call. Definitely, there's definitely a huge opportunity there to help do the research and provide some really good insight into the different tools. And I think to the second part of Cody's question of how do you know which tool to use for a situation is really defining that process or that problem that you have really well. What are the needs to it? Is there security concerns? Are there compliance? Is it HIPAA, et cetera, right? All of those then start to determine and kind of filter out which tools you can use or can't use. You know, if it needs to be HIPAA compliant, using a platform that can be on-prem or can be completely isolated in the cloud environment, et cetera, right? I think those then start to filter out really what tool you should use. And then I think beyond that, right, because really understanding the hard requirements around it is which ones are you most familiar with? Which ones, you know, if you're like Chef was speaking to is, you know, if you're new to no code and more novice in that space from a technology perspective, it's, hey, maybe it's just choosing something that you're more comfortable with, like the Sackers and the Airtables of the world. If it's something that you're more familiar with, and from a technology standpoint, maybe it's going to some of the larger platforms and having these kind of enterprise integrations and resources. So I think part of it's just understanding your level of comfort, how
There's
comfortable you are with them.
Here, I'd throw there for sure, Zach, which is finding out if your organization is already using something that could fit the bill. And it's maybe not exactly, but it gets you like 60, 70, 80% of the way there. It's just a huge hurdle to like, you know, depending on your size of organization, bringing in a new platform can be a 4, 5, 6 months process sometimes. So if you already have the platform and have access to it, it's just a matter of maybe adding some new seats or going to a new level within that platform. I often find that a ton easier if, you know, and you'd be surprised within your different organizations, like, you know, how many tools folks have access to that are being utilized to their fullest capacity.
Yeah, it's a good call.
Sweet. And then Jay has a question. Chef, do you want to invite Jay up onto the stage?
Yeah. He's getting ready.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know Jay, here he is.
Wired. I did not wireless.
Oh, you're wired in, Matrix style. Jay, good to see you.
I didn't know I was going to be on. Hey, great to see everybody. Yeah. No, I'm just curious. I know it sounds like, and I'm sorry I had got on a few minutes late, but
yeah,
you all are talking about big organizations, but I see startups all the time, and they're like, I need $1 million to build a tool. I'm like, no, you don't. So I was wondering if you had ideas or suggestions for some of these startups that just want to get their ideas and test them out. I tell them even if it's Google Forms and put stuff in the Google Sheet, just any experience in that realm would be helpful.
Awesome. Zach, you want to go for that?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few options in that regard, to be honest. You know, if you're looking like in the mobile space, there's tools like Adalo or DraftBit where you can set up applications, I mean, anyone, right? You can go on, sign up right now and start building out mobile applications that will be native and deployed to the iOS App Store or the Android Store. And they're relatively low bars of entry. They're drag and drop interfaces. You can connect to Airtable as a database. You can connect to Google Sheet as being a data source. You can get more complex with API integrations and a lot of those type of tools. And then I think similarly, like if you're looking on the web app side, is depending on the needs, again, there's like the Airtable user interface to build out internal operations and tools. I think there's Retool where you get a little bit more complex for some of these internal operations and building out some complex business logic and workflows and UIs. Most of those are internal facing, not consumer grade style products.
I think Bubble would be like the web app equivalent to like $1.
Bubble, Card. I mean, a lot of those, right, depending on kind of the exact needs and the use cases. But from a prototype perspective, I think a lot of those tools where it's the drag and drop, the UI interface, their self-service where you can sign up and start running with for no cost to low cost are incredible options.
Right. And I'd even say, Zach, and Jay, that the Adalos and Draft Bits and Bubbles are like the blank canvases that you can create, virtually anything on, especially in terms of a V1. But if you're building, if someone builds something like a marketplace, for example, right? Like someone wants to build a local marketplace for babysitters, for example, right? There's no reason you shouldn't be using something like a sharetribe.com, right? Which it's not a blank canvas. They've already built 90% of the product, and it is a white label, so you can put your own label and make your own small customizations. Marketplace. Sure, you could build a marketplace on Bubble or all these tools, but ShareTribe's already done 90% of the work for you. So you might as well just get that out of the door as an MVP, because if your MVP or if your product, if its value prop is non-technical, you should almost always be using no code to validate it.
Agreed. This one, they were working in an industry where people are writing stuff on clipboards, and they just went in capturing data and putting it into Airtable, and that was part of the Airtable's getting more and more records that they can store that way. But yeah, that's what we'd love to see, is the people not understand the need in the big organizations for streamlining processes, but just for startups, get your idea out there and get it validated.
Yeah. Like one of our first, this is funny, this is one of my startup fail stories, right? But
it's only a failure if you don't learn from it.
Yeah. One of the ideas I had, the very beginning of the pandemic, I was like, I wonder if people would be willing to pay for live support instantly, in terms of no code stuff. So I called it Quick Question, and the big concept was, I want this to live as a Chrome extension that you could always easily access. But instead of building my own Chrome extension and building my own scheduling thing and building my own marketplace, all I did was found relevant experts, used a company called Guru, which is an internal knowledge management platform that lives on a Chrome extension, and basically added all of my users as people on my Guru team and set up a Calendly embed. And within 2 hours, I had built out the full product and got to test it and found out that people are really not willing to pay that much for live in-person support. But I was able to find that out very inexpensively and super fast. So,
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I also do want to add that there are a lot of free templates on these tools, for Bubble, Adalo, and Glide. They have plenty of free templates that anyone can use and based off of, for their app or web apps and stuff like that. So all these resources are out there. It's just a matter of finding them and also utilizing them for your own benefit.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sweet. Hey, thanks so much for popping up. So just to wrap up here, so Zach, first of all, thanks so much for joining us on our first Run the World event.
Zach, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
How can people get in touch with you or learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so you can reach me on Twitter, Z Chaitman, Chaitman, or go to Twitter, Team Rapid, teamrapid.com. Hit me up any which way. Smoke signals, those work too.
Yeah, birds, carrier pigeons, everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet. And then just as a plug here, if you enjoy these types of conversations and want to be involved in them more, definitely sign up for the No Code Ops newsletter. It's free if you haven't already at nocodeops.com. You can also apply to the community. We have a vetted and private community of no code operators in Slack that gets access to these events and tons of other benefits to the community members. You can also apply at nocodeops.com. And Shaf and I are also on Twitter as well, so you can easily find us. And yeah, this was awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Have an awesome weekend. And yeah, see y'all soon.
Thanks, you guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.